Welcome to the deep dive. So we're kicking things off today by looking, well, way out there, the universe, basically.
Yeah, it's quite the starting point. Our sources really push us to think about scale. Carl Sagan's pale blue dot.
That tiny speck. And then things like, if the moon was a pixel, it just hammers home how incredibly isolated we are.
Utterly alone, really, a tiny rock. And that perspective, that's absolutely key.
Why? How does that change things for this discussion?
Well, it completely flips the script on traditional economics, doesn't it? Economics usually sees itself as this self-contained thing. Markets, money, all humming along on their own.
Right, like it exists in a vacuum.
Exactly. But these sources, they force us to put the economy back in its place. It's inside society, and society is inside this finite Earth system. That's our mission today. Understand the economy within those real-world limits.
Okay, so we're zooming way out. From like profit margins to planetary boundaries. There's a helpful model for this, isn't there? From Kate Rayworth.
Yes, the Donut Economics author. It's a simple visual, but powerful. Think of three circles, one inside the other.
Like Russian dolls.
Sort of, yeah. The biggest outer circle is Earth, the planet, the ecosystems. Inside that, you've got human society. And then right in the very middle, the smallest circle, that's the economy.
And the point is?
The point is that the economy can't function without society, and neither can exist without a healthy Earth system. It shows the dependency. And crucially, Earth is, for all intents and purposes, a closed system.
Right, energy from the sun comes in.
The heat radiates out. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Everything else we need, it's already here. We have to work with what we've got.
Okay, so if the planet's our ultimate container, we need to understand how it works, how it stays stable. The sources mention environment, ecosystems, sustainable development. What does sustainability look like in nature without us?
It's all about dynamic balance, constant feedback loops. The classic case study is the snowshoe hare and the lynx in Canada.
Ah, yeah, I remember seeing graphs of that.
Exactly. Their populations swing wildly up and down over about a 10-year cycle. The hare numbers can go from nearly 1 million down to maybe just tens of thousands.
Wow, that's a huge swing.
It is. And when the hares crash because there are too many lynx eating them or they run out of food, well, then the lynx population crashes too because their food source is gone.
So nature kind of course corrects. It finds a balance, even if it's a dramatic one.
Precisely. Everything's connected. But then you add humans into the mix. Especially humans with modern technology and exponential population growth.
Like the rabbits in Australia story.
That's a perfect, if unfortunate, example. Introduced without natural predators, they just exploded. A plague. That was messing with one ecosystem, relatively speaking.
And now, over the last couple of centuries.
It's been exponential growth on a global scale. Our population, our resource use, our power to change the environment, it's unprecedented.
Which brings us to examples like Doñana Park.
Yeah, a really sobering case study. This incredibly rich wetland teeming with life.
What happened?
Water. The water that sustained it was diverted, pumped out for irrigated farming, for building golf courses, basically for economic activity.
So the innermost circle, the economy.
Ended up destroying the outermost one, the ecosystem. And the sources make a key point. 200 years ago, we probably couldn't have done that so quickly, so irreversibly. It's the combination of growth and technological power.
So if markets and, well, individual actions aren't stopping this, that's where things like international agreements come in.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Because the damage happens so fast exponentially, while political solutions move much slower, linearly. You get things like the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs.
Our sources called them a bit dull.
Oh, yeah, maybe they are on the surface. But think about it. Getting countries like the U.S., Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, all to agree on anything as a minimum standard for protecting the planet and society, that's actually quite remarkable.
It's like a global attempt to draw lines, to enforce those nested circles.
It's the political world trying to catch up with the physical reality, trying to prevent more doñanas.
Okay, so navigating this complex picture, the sources talk about needing to be critical citizens. What does that actually mean? It's not just about, like, voting, is it?
No, it's deeper than that. It's about developing the ability to look at information data, graphs, maps, arguments, and dissect it to understand the assumptions, identify the key trends, and form your own judgment.
Not just repeating what you're told.
Exactly. Not a parrot repeating information, as the source puts it. You need to be able to judge things for yourself.
And when you apply that critical lens to economic history.
The pattern is stark. You see these graphs, like England's economic output since 1270. It's just exponential, a curve shooting almost straight up, especially in recent centuries.
But the critical question is, Can that last?
On a finite planet, that's the core issue. Can any exponential growth curve continue forever inside a closed system?
Which connects to the Limits to Growth report from the 70s, the Club of
Full.
Rome.
Right. Their computer models predicted that exponential growth in population and industry would eventually hit resource limits and cause collapses in, well, food supply, industrial output, population.
And are we seeing that?
Well, the data suggests that many of those trends are unfortunately playing out somewhat as predicted. It seems we are hitting some of those limits.
And it's not just about, say, running out of oil. The sources mention energy more broadly.
Yeah, it's a combined crisis potentially.
What?
We've got the climate and ecosystem stress, but
Mm.
also potentially an energy crisis looming. People like Antonio Turiel talk about peak oil, not necessarily running out of oil itself, but running out of the cheap, easily extractable oil that fuels the current economic model.
And it's not just oil.
No, the sources mention easily mined uranium production, for instance, already decreasing by 2021. It's about the profitability of extraction hitting limits, the energy return on energy invested.
So if the whole exponential growth engine starts to sputter because of resource and energy limits,
Yeah.
what happens to society? Does the exchange part of the economy just break down?
That's a huge question, and it forces us to look back inside that middle circle human society. How do we actually organize ourselves? The sources identify three basic modes of behavior: sharing, hierarchies, and exchange.
Okay.
And the fascinating thing, historically speaking, is that for the vast, vast majority of human existence, we're talking hundreds of thousands of years, sharing and maintaining close relationships within small groups was dominant. Hierarchies existed, sure, but day-to-day life was built on reciprocity and trust.
So markets and exchange, that wasn't the main thing.
Not at all. Exchange or trade was often something you did with people you didn't know well or didn't trust, strangers, basically.
That's kind of the opposite of how we often think about it now.
It is. And the implication is that when faced with scarcity or crisis, maybe our fundamental, most resilient social structure isn't endless competition and exchange, but actually falling back on sharing, collaboration, and trust within communities.
Right. Let's zoom back into that smallest circle than the economy itself. If it's driving growth and problems, we need to understand its engine, the factors of production.
Okay, yeah. It's crucial to get these clear. Let's use the logger example from the sources. It breaks it down nicely.
Go for it.
First, you need natural resources. That's the actual wood, the tree itself. Can't do anything without it.
Obvious enough.
Second, capital. These are the tools, the axe, maybe a chainsaw, safety helmet, boots, all that stuff. Man-made assets used in production.
Got it. Tools.
Third, technology. This isn't just a tool itself, but the knowledge behind it. How to use the chainsaw efficiently, understanding how the tree will fall, the whole process. It's the level of sophistication.
Okay. Resources, tools, knowledge. What's the last one?
Labor. And the sources are specific here. It's not just physical work, the muscle power. It's also intellectual effort, planning the cut, and emotional labor. The focus, the perseverance needed.
That's a broader definition of labor than just swinging an axe.
It is. And the key insight here is you can theoretically increase capital, technology, and labor almost indefinitely, exponentially even. But natural resources, they're fixed. They come from that outer circle, the Earth. That's the ultimate bottleneck.
You see that in something like the Oreo cookie video example. They mention loads of capital, tech, labor, all processing natural resources.
But if the cocoa or sugar runs low, the whole sophisticated line grinds to a halt. The exponential bits rely entirely on the finite bit.
And we need to remember, not everything we do is economy, right?
Absolutely. Falling in love, playing a game with friends, those are vital parts of society based on relationships and sharing, but they aren't economic transactions in this sense. The economy is specifically about that transformation of resources for exchange.
So who are the players in this economic game?
Four main agents, usually.
Yeah.
Households, businesses, the public sector, government, and the foreign sector, they all interact. But the public sector has a really foundational role in capitalism. It has to create and guarantee the framework. It has to ensure markets can exist, contracts are enforced, and crucially, that private property is respected. Without that state guarantee, the system doesn't work.
And that private ownership aspect is what's historically new about capitalism compared to, say, ancient Egypt.
Precisely. In Pharaonic Egypt, or the Roman Empire, the political rulers, the pharaoh, the emperor, the senators, largely were the economic elite. They controlled the land, the resources, the state power, It was all merged.
Under capitalism.
They're separate, at least formally.
Yeah.
You have an economic elite who own the means of production factories, capital privately. And because they don't have the direct day-to-day duties of governing that ancient elites had, they are free to focus almost entirely on accumulating and reinvesting capital.
Which drives that exponential growth we talked about.
At levels never seen before, exactly. It's a structural feature that prioritizes accumulation above almost everything else.
So capitalism isn't the single unchanging thing. It's relatively new, just a few centuries against 300,000 years of human history.
Which saw everything from, theocracies to incredibly peaceful sharing-based societies. Capitalism is just one recent experiment.
And even within that experiment, there have been very different versions. Let's quickly run through the sources highlight.
Okay. First up, mercantilism. Think 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. The main goal here was for European nations to hoard wealth, mostly precious metals like gold and silver, and boost exports of manufactured goods.
This is the era of, like, colonial empires and triangular trade.
Exactly. Colonies existed to provide cheap raw materials and buy finished goods from the mother country. Think Pirates of the Caribbean economics, basically state-backed extraction.
Right. Then came classical liberalism. Adam Smith, free markets.
Yes, but with a really crucial detail often missed today. It wasn't about a weak state. It actually required a strong state. Why?
To protect property and force contracts.
That, yes, but also to tax unproductive wealth. Specifically things like just sitting on large land estates or inheriting massive fortunes without doing anything productive with them. The idea was to force capital into active, productive use, not let it stagnate.
That's really different from how it's often presented now.
Completely different. Okay, third version, fascism.
A much darker turn.
Absolutely. Based on the idea of survival of the fittest, applied to nations and individuals. The sources mention propaganda justifying cutting support for people seen as weak, those with disabilities or mental health conditions. It's an economy geared towards national power through ruthless efficiency and social exclusion.
Grim. Okay, fourth, Keynesianism. This sounds more familiar, maybe. Post-war boom.
Yes, this emerged largely from popular pressure unions, social movements demanding rights. It led to the welfare state. Public health care, pensions, unemployment benefits, greater regulation, a huge expansion of social and economic rights, funded by higher taxes and economic growth.
So a success in many ways for social sustainability.
Within the wealthy countries that adopted it, yes. But, and this is a critical but, linking back to our nested circles, that success often relied on continued extraction of cheap resources from the poorer countries in the global south.
So it solved some social problems locally, but maybe exported the environmental and social costs elsewhere?
To a significant extent, yes. It wasn't globally just or ecologically sustainable in the long run. It shifted the burden.
Okay. Fifth version, Christian democracy. How did that differ from Keynesianism?
It also supports social welfare. But the goal is less about radical equality and more about maintaining the existing social structure, the sort of social pyramid. The sources use the example of specific privileged health or pension schemes for certain professions, like civil servants or teachers.
That aren't available to, say, cleaners or factory workers.
Exactly. It reinforces existing social strata rather than trying to flatten them. It provides stability but preserves inequality.
And finally, sixth, neoliberalism, the dominant model for the last few decades.
Right. Starting around the 1980s. Its promise was efficiency, growth, attracting investment by cutting taxes, regulations, and privatizing state assets.
And the results, short term.
Often, yes, short-term growth, booms in finance and foreign investment. But the long-term costs, which the sources argue we're seeing now, are significant.
Such as?
Massive increases in wealth concentration, stagnating wages for many, acceleration of climate change due to deregulation, and the rise of corporations so wealthy and powerful they dwarf many national economies. #outro.
Wow. Okay, so we've really gone from the absolute biggest picture, that pale blue dot, down through the nested systems of Earth and society, right into the engine room of the economy.
And looked at the different ways that engine has been configured over the last few centuries.
It feels like we've come full circle. Started with the limits, looked at the system inside those limits.
And the overall picture is pretty clear, isn't it? Capitalism, in its various forms, has undeniably produced incredible economic growth and technological change. But it's also generated ecological crises that threaten the very planetary systems it depends on.
And the social side is complicated, too.
Very. Social sustainability, fairness, equality, well-being really depends on which version of capitalism you're talking about. And even the most socially focused version, Keynesianism, had that major blind spot regarding global justice and resource extraction.
So that point about our deep history, about sharing being the default for millennia and exchange being for strangers, that really sticks with me.
It's fundamental. The sources suggest that building a truly sustainable future, one that respects both planetary boundaries and social fairness, might depend on rediscovering and rebuilding those core behaviors: collaboration, trust, sharing within our communities, not just relying on exchange.
Okay, so here's the final thought for you, the listener. If the health of this whole nested system, Earth, society, economy, ultimately relies on strengthening those foundational social bonds of sharing and mutual support, moving away from pure transactional exchange, what's one concrete step, however small, that you could take this week to actively foster that kind of collaboration and connection in your own immediate world, your street, your workplace, your community group? Think about that small, potentially powerful shift. Join us next time for another deep dive.